What if the silence beneath that ice remembers everything we have forgotten? A world once green, now sealed beneath miles of glacial glass. Its mountains hidden, its rivers turned to stone, its cities erased not by time, but by a decision. Every wind that sweeps across that white horizon carries whispers older than humanity, as if the earth itself is guarding a memory, too dangerous to be spoken. And tonight, as the world falls quiet, we will drift together toward that forbidden silence, to listen to what the ice has been trying to tell us for so very long. They say Antarctica was discovered in the 19th century, a blank space on the map, finally filled in by human curiosity. Yet, long before the first explorers carved their names into the frost, ancient maps sketched its ghostly outline. The Piri Reis map of 1513, drawn on gazelle skin, depicts a vast southern landmass with unsettling accuracy. It shows coastlines that modern sonar would only confirm in the 20th century, lying deep beneath the ice sheet. How could a 16th century navigator have known what lay beneath a frozen continent, a place supposedly untouched and unseen? Had he copied from even older sources, from civilizations erased by flood or erased by intent? The more one looks at the great ice sheet, the less it feels like a frontier of discovery, and the more it feels like a vault, a planetary archive, sealed by forces that do not wish to be disturbed. Beneath miles of compressed snow lies a record of climate, of atmosphere, and perhaps of life that predates our accepted history. Scientists drilling deep into the ice cores speak of ancient trapped air bubbles, of sudden shifts in temperature and magnetic alignment. They speak of abrupt transitions, hinting at events so cataclysmic they reset the Earth's equilibrium. One layer shows soot and ash, another traces of tropical pollen, as if Antarctica had once bathed in warmth, teeming with life, before being suddenly entombed. In the mid-20th century, British and American expeditions mapped mountain ranges beneath the ice. The Gamburtsev Mountains, as high as the Alps, completely hidden by permafrost. How could such peaks, formed by rivers and rain, exist in an environment of eternal frost? The answer lies not in the cold, but in what came before it. Geological evidence shows Antarctica was once near the equator, covered in forests of beech trees and ferns. Fossilized leaves found in the transantarctic mountains still hold their carbon structure, inarguable proof of a long-lost temperate world. But then something shifted. The continent drifted south. The magnetic poles reversed. Or perhaps the planet itself convulsed in ways we still do not understand. Some researchers whisper of Earth crust displacement theory, proposed by Charles Hapgood, the theory that the planet's outer crust can slip over its molten core, moving entire continents in mere millennia, or even centuries. Albert Einstein himself once wrote a cautiously approving letter of Hapgood's argument. He admitted that such a mechanism was indeed possible if the distribution of ice mass caused a crustal instability. Imagine that. A world rebalanced by its own weight. A civilization buried, not by myth, but by motion. If such a shift happened once, what traces did it leave? Beneath the ice, radar imagery has revealed circular anomalies, geometric patterns seemingly too precise for natural chance. Some are dismissed as volcanic formations, others as data errors. And yet, the symmetry persists. In 2016, satellite imagery captured what looked like a metallic dome, briefly emerging from the melting ice before vanishing again under snowfall. The incident was forgotten almost as quickly as it appeared, buried under refutations and denials. But every few years a new photo emerges, a pattern, a shadow, a ridge, and the cycle of speculation begins again. In 1939, Nazi Germany launched an expedition to the area they named New Swabia. They dropped metal swastika emblems from planes and claimed portions of the coast. Officially, it was for whaling and mapping. Unofficially, rumors spoke of underground caverns, warmed by geothermal vents, of secret bases inaccessible to icebreakers, of scientists chasing remnants of a prehistoric technology. After the war, Operation High Jump sent a U.S. fleet, led by Admiral Richard Byrd, to Antarctica in 1946. The mission was supposedly to test logistics for polar warfare. Yet, the mission abruptly ended within months. In a later interview, Byrd alluded to craft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. His words were dismissed as exaggeration. Yet, why would an admiral of his rank say such strange things? And why did the mission retreat so quickly from an uninhabited wasteland? Each story, taken alone, seems absurd, a chain of coincidences and confusion. But when placed side by side, they form a constellation, faint but persistent. The ancient maps that should not exist, the fossils from a vanished forest, the geological shifts endorsed by Einstein himself, and the military missions that ended without explanation. These fragments do not tell a complete story, but they vibrate at the same frequency, like tuning forks, resonating across centuries. The deeper question is not whether Antarctica hides a lost civilization, but why our world seems so determined to see it as only ice. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 forbids all military activity and restricts access to large parts of the continent. No other area on Earth is so closely guarded, so collectively policed, as if the world's nations, so often in conflict elsewhere, agreed on this one thing, that whatever lies beneath must be kept undisturbed. When one stands at the edge of that endless white, the air feels heavy, as if freighted with memory. The sky mirrors the ground in perfect symmetry, and in that doubled silence, the line between reality and myth dissolves. Perhaps the ice is not hiding the secret from us. Perhaps it is protecting us from something we are not ready to remember. And as night falls on the polar plateau, a light wind moves through the ice valleys, the only sound in a place beyond sound. Perhaps it carries the same whisper the ancient map makers heard when they dared to draw the outline of a land they had never seen. It is strange how silence can feel alive. In Antarctica, even the air seems to hold its breath. Scientists call them katabatic winds, dry air pouring down from the ice cap, heavy and relentless. But when you listen closely, it doesn't just sound like wind. It moves in pulses, as if echoing through hollow chambers, deep below the surface, like a breath exhaled from something ancient that has slept for millennia. During the Cold War, this silence became a stage for quiet experiments. In the 1960s, seismologists placed listening devices across the continent to monitor nuclear detonations. Amid the expected data, however, came the anomalies, low-frequency tremors that matched no known geological pattern. They seemed to emanate from beneath the crust, rhythmic, organized, and persistent. The official explanation spoke of ice quakes or glacial shifting, but the data analysts admitted privately that the patterns felt intentional, like a signal, like something below was tapping, lightly but constantly, on the floor of the world. Years later, NASA satellites would record another anomaly, a circular magnetic signature beneath Wilkes Land, over 300 kilometers wide, buried under miles of ice. Some researchers compared it to the Chicxulub crater, the impact that ended the age of dinosaurs. But the Wilkes Land structure was different, deeper, more symmetrical, with a magnetic intensity too consistent for natural chance. Was it an impact crater, or was it a gateway, sealed by geological time? There are stories, quiet stories, shared among pilots and field engineers who worked there. Stories of places where compasses spin wildly, where machinery malfunctions, where drones lose signal instantly as they pass a certain coordinate. In one report from 2001, a satellite feed from an ice drilling station suddenly terminated mid-sentence, replaced by hours of static. When contact was re-established, the researchers stated only that they had encountered unexpected subglacial formations. The data from their instruments was confiscated. Their base was later decommissioned. Mainstream science explained such incidents as magnetic interference, equipment failure, or psychological stress from the isolation. And how many failures must repeat before coincidence loses its shape? Even beneath the most rational explanations, there lingers a residue of unease, the feeling that the continent itself is resisting discovery, as if something down there is bending the rules we trust. Some geophysicists have proposed that parts of the ice sheet are melting from below, not from above. This implies a hidden heat source. The discovery of vast subglacial lakes like Lake Vostok, sealed under 4 kilometers of ice, confirmed that warmth exists where it should not. Lake Vostok's water has been untouched for at least 15 million years, preserved in absolute darkness and pressure. When samples were drilled, they revealed microbial life, unlike anything on the surface. But perhaps the real significance is not in the life, but in the memory. Ice preserves sound. It preserves temperature. It even preserves the magnetic alignment of molecules. What if, beneath those frozen layers, lies not just the history of the planet, but the memory of something that once walked upon it, something that was erased before we learned to write? The magnetic anomalies, the radar echoes, the rhythmic tremors. Are these the remnants of an architecture too vast to comprehend, still humming softly under the weight of its burial? In ancient myths, the South was always the place of descent. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, the land behind the north wind, but they also hinted at its opposite, the land below, where the sun vanished for half the year, and the gods retreated after the flood. The Maya spoke of the underworld, Xibalba, a place of ice and stars, where souls journeyed through silence. The Vedic texts refer to a polar axis connecting heaven and earth that was broken during an age of inversion when the world turned upside down. Were these just metaphors for death and rebirth, or encoded memories of a time when the poles actually shifted, when paradise froze and was forgotten? What is most fascinating is this collective amnesia. Humanity has mapped the ocean floor, sent probes to Mars, yet over 99% of Antarctica remains unseen by human eyes. Why is there so little curiosity for what might be our own deepest archaeological site? Access is restricted. Satellite imagery is limited. Even civilian flights are forbidden from crossing certain coordinates for magnetic safety reasons. The scientists who work there sign non-disclosure agreements for national security. What could possibly demand such silence in a land of only ice? The answer may not be a human conspiracy, but a pact with something older. The ice may be holding what cannot be integrated into our history, the remains of an era incompatible with our current story of human origin. Researchers, marginal but sincere, speak of technofossils, remnants of artificial magnetic alloys, found in ice cores, though their findings are dismissed as contamination. Others point to sonar readings near the Shackleton Range that look like the outlines of symmetrical structures buried beneath the ice sheet. The mainstream response is polite silence. The data is real. The interpretation is not. In the late 1990s, Russian researchers drilling into Lake Vostok reported anomalous luminous phenomena, flashes of light seen beneath the ice, as if light was emanating from the abyss. The event never repeated, but it remains in their logs. One scientist later described it quietly. It was like watching the earth breathe. That sentence haunted the team for years. The ice is not just a cage, it is a record. The oldest ice cores from Vostok and Dome Fuji record catastrophes. There are sudden shifts in isotope ratios, signs of mass temperature collapse, followed by layers of volcanic ash and cosmic dust. To some, these are traces of a meteor impact. To others, they mark a reset, a cleansing, an erasure. The time between these events is strangely rhythmic, roughly 12,000 years, just long enough for civilizations to rise, peak, and then vanish without a trace. Perhaps that is why the myths of the Great Flood, of destruction by water and ice, recur in every culture. From Greece's Deucalion to Mesopotamia's Utnapishtim, memories of a global cataclysm, the iridium layer found in the ice, the same extraterrestrial element found at the boundary of extinctions. The Wilkes Land impact may have tilted the planet itself, casting Antarctica into its polar tomb, and now that ice is melting. Perhaps we were not meant to discover everything at once. And if that is true, then every crack in the glacier, every whisper of melt, is not just a warning about climate change. It is the slow unsealing of memory. And what happens when the Earth's memory begins to thaw? What truths might rise uninvited into the light? The official explanation given was geotechnical heat, a natural function of the planet. But there was something strange. Beneath miles of ice, where there should have been only rough bedrock, the instruments detected a hollow, and the geometry of this hollow was angular. Its floor was unnaturally flat. In a private correspondence, one of the expedition's lead geophysicists described it with a single word: architecture. That word, of course, was edited out of the subsequent scientific paper. architecture was replaced with a safer term: anomalous structure. It is easy to dismiss such details as the poetic hyperbole of a tired scientist. Science, after all, demands restraint. It demands cold, objective data. But even in that restraint, one can feel a strained curiosity fighting against the silence. Even in the driest reports, there is an unspoken question hiding between the lines. What if what lies beneath the ice is not just rock? There are legends, as old as time itself. Legends of the Elder Ones, beings who retreated to the ends of the earth as the sky fell and the stars changed. From the clay tablets of Sumer to the cliffs of the Andes, from the esoteric texts of Egypt to the oral histories of Polynesia, the echo of a southern sanctuary persists. The land of the Watchers, the place of rebirth after the Great Flood. These are not the wild fantasies of isolated tribes. They are coordinates whispered across civilizations, hidden in myth. And then, modern science inadvertently finds the echo. A CIA memorandum from 1962, declassified decades later, refers to anomalous findings beneath the Antarctic crust, consistent with artificial structure. The file, of course, is fragmented. The coordinates are censored. The tone is cold, clinical. But what is most telling is that this file was attached to a report on global magnetic anomalies, which means that whatever they found, it did not matter to archaeology, but to physics. It was not a dead ruin. It was something still affecting the entire planet. Shortly thereafter, the area was cordoned off under new territorial protections. Coincidence, perhaps, but the timing seems too perfectly aligned with discoveries that were never made public. Somewhere between myth and geology, a question exists that few dare to speak aloud. What if Antarctica is not merely the end of our world, but the origin of our forgetting? Every great civilization tells of a lost golden age. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, a time when knowledge was intact, when harmony existed between heaven and earth, until hubris, or a cosmic cataclysm, wiped it all away. What if those myths were not just about distant seas, but about the South, about the continent hidden under eternal ice? Could the buried Gamburtsev Mountains, the ghost Alps of Antarctica, be the peaks once called sacred in those forgotten tongues? Could the vanished rivers of East Antarctica, now just radar scars, be the rivers that once fed primordial cities, now remembered only in dreamlike scripture? Orthodox history does not allow for such speculation. The timeline of human evolution is neat, linear. It is anchored to the Rift Valley in Africa and the slow march north. But the deeper we dig, the less linear history becomes. Homo sapiens, it seems, did not emerge alone. We coexisted, overlapped with others, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps those we have not yet named. Genetic traces are found in populations far from any known migration route. What if one of those unknown branches, one that possessed an intellect and technology we cannot comprehend, sought refuge in the far south just before the Great Ice Age struck, taking their knowledge with them? The bones may be gone, but what if the architecture remains? Tonight, as you listen, think of this: millions of square miles of ice, silent, a silence so thick it almost has weight, and beneath it, a secret is waiting. The harder we stare into the ice, the more it seems to be staring back. This is not a scientific statement. It is a recorded experience. Our most sophisticated instruments begin to fail in specific regions of the continent. Not random failures from the cold. They are failures too specific, too too strange to be coincidence. Compasses spin, depth sounders go dead. Acoustic waves sent thousands of meters down return distorted, as if they were bent around invisible masses that radar cannot detect. Geophysicists blame shifting ice densities. Engineers blame extreme magnetic fields. But the men and women who are actually there, standing on the ice sheet in the absolute silence of the polar night, feel something else. They describe a sensation, the feeling of being watched. Even the stars above the South Pole seem to behave strangely. They glitter with an unusual intensity, their light refracted by thin atmospheric layers that shimmer like liquid glass. In moments like that, it is easy for the imagination to run away, easy to imagine that the ice is not dead matter, not frozen water, but consciousness, a consciousness that is slow, vast, and infinitely patient. When explorers, ancient and modern, speak of Antarctica, they often describe a feeling of near religious awe, even fear. They do not fear the cold or the storms. They fear the land itself. The land seems aware of trespass. It punishes arrogance with storms that appear from nowhere. It swallows tracks overnight. It erases footprints within hours, as if you were never there. It disorients the mind, turning measurable distances into endless mirages. In a field journal from the 1950s, one glaciologist, after weeks in the unrelenting white silence, wrote only a single line. "I think it remembers." The sentence was never elaborated upon. The following pages return to dry metrics of temperature and ice density. But the line remains, hanging in the frozen air. What does it mean? How can ice remember? Is the Earth itself capable of memory? Not in language or images, but in vibration, in resonance, in magnetic imprints etched into its crystalline structure. And if so, could that memory, like an old wound, one day reopen? Perhaps the melting we are witnessing now is not merely a symptom of climate. Perhaps it is a revelation. As the planet warms, the ancient ice thins, revealing what was meant to be buried forever. Ice-penetrating radar begins to detect patterns etched into the bedrock below. Concentric ridges, symmetrical grids, perfectly straight depressions running for miles. They resemble the foundations of something immense. NASA's radar scans call them, harmlessly, flow anomalies. To the human eye, however, they look disturbingly intentional. Some say that when all the ice melts, we will not find a continent. We will find a mirror showing us the version of history we chose to forget. Until then, Antarctica waits in silence, patient as stone, its secrets buried in cold, white light. And somewhere beneath that endless white, perhaps a city still sleeps, its architecture frozen mid-thought, its knowledge sealed in crystal, waiting for the world to be quiet enough to listen again. There are nights on the pole when the aurora flickers like breath, silent ribbons of green and violet trembling above the horizon. To the few who have seen it from the heart of the continent, it feels like memory, an ancient code pulsing in the sky, as if the earth itself is whispering in color. Beneath that shimmering sky in the 1970s, a team of Soviet scientists at Vostok Station made a quiet discovery. They were not looking for cities. They were merely studying the conductivity of the ice. But their instruments began to register anomalous spikes in electromagnetic activity, patterns that were organized, too organized to be random. At first, they thought it was interference from their own equipment, a glitch in the machinery. But the rhythm persisted. It repeated every 23 hours and 56 minutes. Not 24 hours, but 23 hours and 56 minutes. That is the exact rotational period of the Earth relative to the stars. A sidereal day. This meant that whatever was emitting the signal, it was not synchronized to the sun. It was synchronized to the cosmos. The data was immediately classified. Years later, it was dismissed, buried in archives under the label of equipment noise. But that noise had an echo. Thousands of kilometers north, a similar anomaly was recorded beneath the Arctic Circle. 2 poles, 2 echoes, answering each other through the body of the planet. Some hypothesized it was the resonance of the Earth's magnetic core. A quiet few wondered if it was a remnant, a hum emanating from something deep beneath the crust, still operational, long after its builders were gone. If such thoughts sound impossible, remember this. Even now, beneath the Antarctic plateau, there are structures no one can explain. Networks of subglacial ridges detected by ice-penetrating radar that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. They form hexagonal and circular geometries that no known natural process can create. Officially, they are called ice flow formations, caused by pressure and meltwater. Yet, the mathematical precision of their spacing, uniform to the meter, leaves geophysicists uneasy. It does not look like erosion. It looks like design. And there is one location known to researchers, but absent from most maps. Dome C. Here, in 2004, European scientists drilled for the oldest ice core ever recovered, nearly 1 million years of frozen atmosphere. And then, beneath the very last layer of ice, the drill hit something unexpected. A hard surface, one that did not match the expected bedrock. The team stopped immediately. No core was ever brought up from that depth. The finding was never fully published. Years later, in interviews, one team member would only say, with visible reticence, "It was not what we thought it was." Perhaps the human mind itself cannot tolerate so much mystery. We need patterns we can control, narratives we can finish. But Antarctica refuses completion. Every answer dissolves into a new question, each one older than the last. Among the early explorers, one sensed this long before radar or satellites. Admiral Richard Byrd, who led multiple expeditions in the 1930s and 40s, kept a private journal, entirely separate from his official nautical logs. In it, he described a flight over the polar interior, where instead of endless white, he claimed to have seen lush valleys, rivers, and what he called prehistoric life. Historians have dismissed this. They call it an optical illusion, a complex mirage caused by light and ice. Yet Byrd's later interviews remained haunted by what he could not explain. "We must prepare," he once said cryptically, "for new truths about this planet." The legends surrounding Byrd's account have since merged with conspiracy theory. Hollow Earth, hidden kingdoms, secret bases. But even stripped of that fantasy, his experience touches something archetypal. The idea that the poles are gateways, not boundaries. The ancients spoke of such gateways, entrances to the inner world, where gods and men once met. In Tibetan law, Shambhala lies hidden beyond the eternal snows. In Norse myth, the roots of the tree Yggdrasil reach into a frozen abyss. Myths from opposite sides of the globe, converging on imagery too similar to ignore. Light within darkness, warmth within cold, life within ice. Is it possible these were not metaphors, but memories? That long before recorded history, something happened at the poles. something that fractured the human story and left behind only echoes, disguised as myth. During the International Polar Year in 2007, a joint Japanese-French team deployed deep-range magnetometers across East Antarctica. Their results, published briefly and then inexplicably retracted, described mass concentrations. These were areas of immense magnetic density, inconsistent with any known geology. The shapes were massive, regular, and aligned, with ancient celestial coordinates. In the brief window before the report was scrubbed from public servers, independent analysts noted an alignment, one of the largest magnetic anomalies, pointed directly to Orion's belt. The same pattern mirrored in the 3 Giza pyramids. Coincidence? Or continuity? A forgotten unity between the sky and the ground, a geometry of consciousness that was once understood and then lost. Was Antarctica the foundation stone of this system? The southern anchor for a planetary design that is now fragmented across continents? Or is this merely our own need, the need to find meaning in the endless void, imposing intelligence where there is only ice? And yet, the resonance remains. Satellites continue to register subglacial heat plumes in geometrically arranged clusters, and we circle it from above, always keeping a safe distance, forbidden by treaty, restricted by law. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, declared the continent reserved for peace and science alone. But its protocols do not just ban weapons. They ban independent exploration. They ban mining. They ban unannounced flyovers. No other area on Earth enjoys such absolute protection of secrecy, a perfect silence guarded by mutual agreement, even among rival nations. Why does peace require such absolute silence? What kind of discovery could possibly justify that permanent restraint? Perhaps the silence is not to protect us from Antarctica. Perhaps it is to protect us from ourselves, from the truth. Because whatever rises from the ice, be it fossil, architecture, or artifact, will not fit our current story. It will rewrite who we are and where we came from. And now that control is failing. The ice itself is telling the secret. As the planet warms, as the air hums with the sound of melt, something beneath begins to stir. Not just water, but time itself. Rivers are forming beneath the surface, carving tunnels through darkness untouched for millions of years. Scientists speak in cautious tones. Subglacial instability, climate thresholds, runaway melt. But their data cannot measure what is truly escaping. It is the past itself, liquefying. Every bubble of air that rises from the ice carries a breath of an atmosphere we no longer remember breathing. There is a melancholy in this thaw, the pain of rediscovery, the realization that what we lost was not myth. It was home. In 2023, radar imaging of the East Antarctic Plateau revealed patterns that defy all geological explanation. An arrangement of concentric ridges and radiating spokes, spanning over 50 kilometers, perfectly circular. The official term was isostatic anomaly. Within weeks, the raw data vanished from public access. No one, it seems, wanted to talk about what it looked like. A structure, ancient, vast, and intentional. This is the quiet horror, not the fear of monsters or gods, but the fear of recognition that what lies deep beneath is not alien, but ancestral, that we are the descendants of a forgotten age now circling the ruins of our own beginning. There will come a time perhaps soon, when the great glaciers retreat, exposing what lies beneath. When that happens, the world will be forced to confront its own reflection. The forbidden continent will be forbidden no more, and in that icy mirror, humanity will see itself, not as a conqueror, not as an explorer, but as a survivor of a cycle too large to comprehend. The question is not whether we are ready to discover. The question is, are we ready to remember? Because memory is not gentle. It returns as a flood, as a fire. And Antarctica, the last untouched place, is the Earth's frozen conscience, holding everything we chose to forget, the warmth, the fall, and the voices that came before us. So tonight, as the world turns quietly in its sleep, and the two poles exchange whispers through the deep magnetic dark, listen to that silence, not as an emptiness, but as an invitation. Somewhere beneath that endless ice, beneath the continents of time and sorrow, something ancient is waiting, not to be discovered, but to be heard. In the tapestry of Eastern cultural belief, the moon is perhaps the most familiar and intimate image. From the time we were in the cradle, we knew the moon through our mother's gentle lullabies, through the fairy tales our grandmothers told of Sister Hang and Uncle Quoy. Since time immemorial, the moon has been present as a silent companion to humanity. Our ancestors looked up at the sky, tracing its cycle around the earth, and from it, created their own measure of time, the lunar calendar. The days of the full moon, perfectly round like a silver disk, are often sacred milestones, great festivals in the spiritual life of Eastern peoples. While in school, surely all of us were once immersed in poems featuring the image of the moon. It is a symbol of romance, of longing, of eternal beauty. It would seem that the moon is merely a muse for poetry, but few know that, behind that gentle light, the moon is also linked to countless mysterious stories, to enigmas that modern science is still struggling to explain. In Western culture, and in the hidden corners of modern media, strange structures on the moon have appeared more than once. Towers, domes, geometric shapes that seem to have intent. But then, just as quickly as they appeared, this information suddenly vanished from the mass media. Photographic evidence was censored in baffling ways. Documentary footage was hidden away. Recently, strange videos of the so-called lunar wave have appeared, showing a mysterious ripple sweeping across the satellite's surface. If you have seen it, it is certain you share the same creeping feeling, that the moon perhaps is like a virtual projection and not a solid physical entity. With just one click, you can find a multitude of videos of unexplainable lights, of unidentified flying objects taking off and landing on its surface. To this day, they remain just unidentified. Can science explain these phenomena? Or more importantly, why is the evidence, no matter how clear it may seem, ignored or even mercilessly dismissed? Hidden behind the gentle light we gaze at every night, are there perhaps countless horrors concealed, more than we can imagine? The central question, the thorniest question, is this: is the moon truly an artificial satellite? Mainstream scientific studies indicate that the moon was formed from a cataclysmic event known as the Big Whack. To visualize it, imagine a giant object, the size of Mars, crashing straight into a young Earth about 4.6 billion years ago. This terrible collision ejected a massive cloud of vaporized material into space, into orbit around the Earth. That cloud gradually cooled, condensed, coalesced, and formed the moon. It seems, according to what the scientific community has published, the moon is just a natural product of the universe, formed from chaos and collision. But if you dig deeper into the research, you will be truly surprised. The documents about the moon's anomalies are not new. They have existed since ancient times, from its impossibly perfect geometric symmetry to the strange accounts of astronauts. It all seems to lead to one logical, though terrifying, conclusion. The moon, in effect, has a hollow structure, and it is merely an artificial satellite intentionally placed in Earth's orbit by someone. One bold theory suggests that several thousand years ago, as human life was just beginning to blossom, brilliant engineers from somewhere else completed this great work. Their intention? To change the biological rhythm of the Earth and at the same time control the activities of the inhabitants living here. Is this just baseless rumor? The moon appears to be just a natural landscape, but if we truly spend time observing it closely, we might see what the NASA researcher, Mr. Robin Brake, saw. He once famously said, "It would be easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than to explain its existence." Why is that? Even researchers cannot definitively explain. Why is the moon older than the Earth we live on? Rock samples show that the period the moon has existed is even longer than the Earth's, by millions of years. And then, there is its size. If the moon were proportional to its parent planet, like other satellites in the solar system, its diameter would be only about 30 miles, about 48 kilometers. But the truth is, it is not just double or triple. It is 72 times larger than its predicted diameter. The moon's actual diameter is about 2,160 miles, about 3,476 kilometers. There is no other satellite planet in this universe that we know of, which is 1/4 the size of the host planet it orbits. Its existence is a paradox. The paradox doesn't stop at its size. The moon's surface is also a perplexing riddle. The volcanic plains, the scars from meteorite impacts, are things scientists have always been curious about. The different diameters of the craters show impacts of completely different sizes and forces. Logically, a stronger impact should create a deeper crater. But strangely, the craters on the moon all have a similar depth. This suggests that beneath the layer of surface dust and rubble is an extremely hard inner shell, something that has prevented any object from penetrating, regardless of the impact force. When astronauts tried to drill into these craters, they could barely penetrate its surface. And more astonishingly, they discovered something that should not have been there: processed metals. Brass, mica, and even pure titanium. These elements in such a pure form are not products of nature. They are created for use in high-tech architectural designs, such as building submarines or the hulls of spacecraft. But if the moon's physical structure is strange enough, its position in space is what truly challenges all our understanding. When you examine the geometric and mathematical relationship between the sun, the moon, and the Earth, you will see they are astonishingly precise, illogically precise. We all know of the total solar eclipse. It is the moment when the moon is the perfect size to completely obscure the sun as seen from Earth. Why is that? Because the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and it also coincidentally is closer to Earth than the sun by exactly 400 times. This absolute coincidence is not found anywhere else in the universe we have ever observed. Consider these numbers further. The sun's diameter is 109 times that of the Earth. The Earth's diameter is nearly 4 times that of the moon. In terms of volume, nearly 50 moons could fit inside the Earth, and over 1 million Earths inside the sun. The numbers seem arranged, and that is just the beginning. There are strange coincidences revolving around the number 366. The Earth makes nearly 366 rotations, the number of days in a leap year, as it completes its orbit around the Sun. Meanwhile, complex cyclical calculations show the Moon orbits the Earth 366 times in every 10,000 Earth days. But one of the strangest things, which we often take for granted, is tidal locking. The scientific definition makes it sound very natural. Tidal locking is simply understood as the Moon's rotation matching its orbit perfectly. In short, this means that, contrary to most natural laws, one face of the Moon is always facing the Earth. We, from the ground, will never see its other side. Therefore, although it is not dark at all, that hidden part is still often known by the name, the dark side of the Moon. The universe has countless mysteries, but one thing is certain: almost everything in the solar system rotates, including the Earth. Our planet's rotation should have thrown the Moon into a violent counterspin, but it doesn't. It is locked. This very fact makes the Moon just like a giant eye, observing the Earth from above. And this eye, named the Moon, it seems, never stops its surveillance. If you observe a total solar eclipse from space, you will see this image, a brilliant ring of fire surrounding an absolute black shadow. Looking at it, what do you see? It looks just like a human eye. And its orbit is also a mystery. Most natural satellites orbit their planets along the equator. So why does the Moon orbit our Earth at a strange 5-degree inclination? The answer is astonishing, because that precise distance, that precise altitude, and that strange elliptical path allow it to regulate the living activities on Earth. How? By creating the ocean tides and regulating the seasons of the year. According to the laws of physics, the Moon's position should not be possible. Did you know that, without the Moon, the Earth's orbit would change? The planet we live on would then have an unstable gravitational pull. The Earth would wobble, spin, following no law at all. The Moon, it turns out, is just like a random anomaly. That is extremely lucky for humanity. It is the anchor that keeps our planet stable, allowing life to flourish. The question is it luck, or is it intentional design? The gravity of this astronomical machine extends across all of Earth's oceans. When the tide is high, it is when the Moon is aligned with our planet. But the tide also rises on the opposite side of the planet, because gravity has pulled the Earth toward the Moon, stronger than it pulls the mass of water on that far side. On the full moon and new moon, when the Sun, Earth, and Moon are aligned, their combined gravity creates spring tides, which are higher than normal. Conversely, when the Moon is at a right angle, the pull is dispersed, creating neap tides. And when the Moon is at its closest position to Earth in its elliptical orbit, we have the most powerful perigean spring tides. All of this powerful pulling and jerking creates an interesting effect. It is slowing our planet's rotation by about 1.5 milliseconds per century. All of these effects we still see as normal. They are a natural part of the world. Until the hypothesis emerged that the Moon is an artificial satellite created by an alien race and placed into orbit. It sounds truly fantastical. But to answer this question, first, we need to understand our own history. And perhaps the ancients already prepared the answer for us. Although this is not something we are taught in textbooks or lecture halls, there are countless records from different cultures scattered across the globe that mention a shocking concept: the time before the Moon. The Moon, hasn't it always been in the sky? The list of those who wrote about this are not dreamers, but include famous philosophers and historians of ancient Greece, including Aristotle. They recorded a period when the night sky had no moon. Proselenes, proselene, is the ancient Greek term for the people before the time of the moon. Columbian legend tells that in the most ancient time of this continent, when the moon had not yet appeared in the sky, humans already existed. When describing the history of the region of Arcadia in Greece, ancient historians wrote that the Pelasgians, the predecessors of the Greeks, had lived in this area since a very ancient time, at a time when the moon did not exist. Apollonius of Rhodes also mentioned the same thing. He spoke of a time when not all orbs were in the heavens, and the moon was one of those orbs. The evidence doesn't just stop in Europe. In Bolivia, symbols on the wall of the Calasasaya courtyard, believed to have been built around 13,000 BC, provide evidence that the moon entered Earth's orbit at a specific point in time, long after humans had appeared. The indigenous people living in the Bogota highlands of the eastern Cordilleras of Colombia also have countless oral histories referring to the time before the moon. But perhaps the most detailed and bizarre legend comes from the Zulu, a tribe in Africa. According to Zulu legend, the moon is actually hollow, and it is the home of an ancient race of humanoid reptiles called the Chitauri. Legend says that the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by two leader brothers, Wowan and Mpanku. They were described as aquatic beings with skin like fish scales. Legend says that Wowane and Mpanku stole the moon in the form of a giant egg from a great fire dragon. After using up all the yolk of the hollow egg, the moon was left as just a hollow shell. Then they rolled the moon across the sky, down to Earth, and placed it into orbit. This event, according to the Zulu, caused a terrible catastrophe. It caused the great deluges on this planet, ending the golden age of the past. A great flood, a planetary reset button event. Does this fantastical legend align with human understanding of history? Scientists today believe that around 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, all races living on this planet converged to a single common ancestor, mitochondrial Eve. This suggests that humanity once went through a bottleneck event, a terrible catastrophe that nearly drove us to extinction. Could the cause of this be that, at that time, the Earth did not yet have a moon, and its sudden appearance caused the legendary Great Flood? Does this explain why so many cultures with no connection to each other all speak of visitors from outer space and a global flood? The stories of a time without a moon seem too absurd, because, according to scientific calculations, moon rocks are older than the Earth itself. So we are facing an irreconcilable contradiction. Did the scientists miscalculate? Or is it that what we know is not the truth? The idea that the moon was brought here and is not a natural satellite has existed for a very long time. But what if those impossible things are actually true? If the moon was truly brought here by some method, was its role merely to regulate life on Earth? Does that have any connection to humanoid races from beyond Earth? Could the answer perhaps be found in ancient works, not unlike the tablets of the Sumerians? An ancient civilization that showed the appearance of extraterrestrials, Anunnaki. According to them, it was a superior species that genetically modified humans to turn us into slaves, to serve them right on this planet. According to believers of this theory, the first sign to pay attention to is the moon's mass. Most celestial bodies have their mass concentrated at the central core. But the moon's mass, according to calculations, is concentrated entirely in its outer crust. That means its inner core is completely hollow. How can an object with a diameter 1/4 of the Earth's have such a small mass? If put on a scale, the moon's mass, according to some controversial calculations, is only 1/200th the mass of our planet. This discrepancy is an absurdity that has baffled scientists for a long time. Furthermore, the chemical composition discovered on the moon's surface strengthens the hypothesis that this is an artificial structure. Rocks on the moon contain large amounts of metals not naturally found in the environment without human intervention. High-quality titanium, which is used to build space satellites and submarines, was found in large quantities. Analysis of the samples obtained also revealed the presence of high-concentration uranium, including small amounts of radioactive material used to produce plutonium. After many years of research in 1970, two Russian scientists, Vasin and Shcherbakov, published a shocking article in the magazine Sputnik titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" The article hypothesized that the moon is an artificial satellite, brought into orbit by incredibly intelligent beings. Based on the absolute logic of its size and its perfectly calculated seeming rotation, they believed the moon had been placed in orbit long ago. The two Russian scientists were not alone. In 2006, two British researchers, Knight and Butler, published the book, Who Built the Moon? They pointed out that the absolutely perfect proportional geometry and the sequence of integers for every aspect of the moon are unique. They concluded that it is more likely the moon was brought into our orbit, and that it is a hollow planet. But the most convincing and strangest evidence came from NASA itself. In November 1969, the Apollo 12 crew sent their module crashing into the moon, creating an artificial seismic event. Ultra-sensitive equipment recorded the impact. The result stunned everyone. The moon rang, like a bell, for nearly 40 minutes. And it took almost 9 minutes for the vibrations to reach their peak. This discovery was so fantastic that NASA prepared for the next test. This time, they used a heavier rocket equivalent to 11 tons of TNT from the Apollo 13 craft. The researchers placed seismometers over 100 miles from the impact site, and this time, the moon rang out like a giant gong. It reverberated for 3 hours. Geologists say that the Earth, even during the largest earthquakes, only reacts to the shock for a few minutes. This result was beyond all imagination. Many began to suspect the moon seems to be a specially designed space structure with an extremely stable crust to withstand impacts from asteroids. Beneath that hollow and resonant surface, perhaps even more terrifying things are hidden. Images taken by the lunar orbiter, two spacecraft on November 23, 1966, showed more than 6 structures resembling tall towers on the moon's surface. These images were reported in famous newspapers with a statement from one scientist that they were too perfect to be natural. Soviet space engineer Alexander Argonov said these towers were arranged identically to the peaks of the ancient Egyptian pyramids, and they cast shadows with 4 perfect 90-degree angles. Dr. Farouk Elbaz of NASA also affirmed they could not be natural objects. They were taller than any building on Earth. But then, all the facts seemed to break off. NASA refused to investigate further, stating it was just a trick of light and shadow. These topics were quickly removed from the media. It wasn't until 1994, when the old photos were colorized and digitally processed, that these anomalous structures reappeared clearly. But there is one final mystery. Even before the first landing, the Apollo 10 craft flew around the backside of the moon, the side we never see. Their recordings astonished scientists. Apollo 10 had recorded strange sounds never before heard in outer space. Those sounds were likened to music, like the sound of electromagnetic radios. It was quite similar to the sound you hear when an airplane is taking off and landing. There is an object that reigns over our night sky, so familiar it is almost forgotten, yet endlessly distant and mysterious. It is the moon. For millennia, it was just a pale blue light, a muse for poetry, a god in legends, the eternal calendar for lost civilizations. We looked up at it, told stories about it, and revered it, but it remained there, hovering, silent, until in the mid-20th century, in a fury of ambition and technology, humankind decided that over there was not enough. We had to touch it. In the 1960s, the American Space Agency, NASA, set a seemingly impossible goal to put a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth. At the time, this was a bold declaration, a direct challenge to the laws of physics and the limits of imagination. This great conquest consumed immense brain power. It was paid for with sweat, tears, and even the blood of brave pioneers. The test failures, the tragedies that claimed the lives of astronauts, nothing could extinguish the fire of desire to reach for the stars. And then, that day finally came. July 16, 1969. The Apollo 11 craft, a marvel of human engineering, roared and soared from the launch pad, carrying three men, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. They flew into the moon's orbit, drawing closer to that alien world. 4 days later, on July 20th, the entire world held its breath. From the control center in Houston to the most remote villages, an estimated 600 million people were glued to their television screens. It was the largest audience for a broadcast in human history. And then, the lunar module named Eagle had landed. When Neil Armstrong stepped from the craft onto the gray surface, he spoke an immortal line. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. The age-old dream had become reality. Armstrong and Aldrin successfully planted the American flag on that barren land. They collected rock samples, including the mineral armalcolite, a name combined from the names of the three astronauts. Strangely, scientists later discovered that this mineral also exists in many places on Earth. The era of human space exploration had officially begun. It was an undeniable victory. But was that the whole story? In the euphoria of victory, strange details were overlooked. NASA claimed to have eliminated the mysterious noise caused by radio waves interacting with the moon's magnetic field. But the problem is, the moon does not have a magnetic field like other planets. So what created those noises? And then there were 2 minutes of silence. Just as the craft landed, both the video and radio feed suddenly went dead for 2 minutes. The official explanation? A simultaneous equipment failure. Both the camera and the radio, the most advanced equipment of the time, failed at the same moment? That is almost impossible. Years later, those close to Armstrong revealed a different story. They said that during those 2 short minutes, Armstrong had intentionally switched his communication line to a private medical channel and reported something unbelievable. His voice, according to unofficial transcripts, was full of tension. "Sir, there are other spacecraft here. They are lined up on the far side of the crater. They are truly enormous, and they are watching us." This information has never been confirmed, but it raises a disturbing question. Why did the astronauts, upon returning to Earth, have such a strange mood? When they were interviewed privately, there was no sign of excitement or enthusiasm. Their faces, even to non-experts in body language, clearly showed unease. They looked like people who had just seen a truth they were not allowed to tell. Neil Armstrong, in a rare moment of hesitation, said that it really was the beginning of a new age. But perhaps the most curious point was his speech 25 years after that historic day. He said, "There are great ideas, undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. The protective layer of truth that Armstrong mentioned. What is it? What or who is preventing us from reaching that truth? What happened during those 2 minutes of silence on the Sea of Tranquility? And why did humanity's heroes return with the burden of an unspoken secret? Neil Armstrong was not the only one who carried the burden of a secret. He was just the first. As humans continued to push beyond Earth's safe atmosphere, the list of unexplained experiences grew longer, whispered in closed-door meetings and only leaked decades later. These men, the astronauts, were the most carefully selected individuals on the planet. They were engineers, test pilots, men with nerves of steel, trained to report exactly what they saw, not what they thought they saw. And yet, Scott Carpenter, one of the first astronauts on the Mercury Atlas 7, admitted that at no time are astronauts ever really alone in space. They are always under surveillance by UFOs. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, lived much of his later life in seclusion, avoiding the spotlight. Years later, he would only make fragmented, cryptic statements. In one interview, he commented on Mars's moon, Phobos, stating, "There is a monolith on it, an artificial structure. When we found out about it, we wondered, who is the one who put it there?" Astronaut Ellison Onizuka, the first Japanese American to fly in space, admitted to friends that during his mission, he had seen strange, small beings. They looked human, but he was sure they did not originate from Earth. And perhaps the most outspoken was Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth astronaut to walk on the moon during the Apollo 14 mission. After leaving NASA, he spent the rest of his life talking about what he believed to be the truth. Mitchell declared emphatically, "Yes, the visit by extraterrestrial beings is completely real. We have been visited, and they will continue." VO. These admissions lead us to a great intellectual contradiction, a perplexing question posed by the genius physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950. The Fermi paradox, as it is known, is simple but profound. Fermi pointed out that our universe is immensely vast and ancient. In our Milky Way galaxy alone, there are hundreds of billions of stars. If only a small fraction of those have Earth-like planets, then the probability of life, and even other intelligent civilizations, existing is very high. Some of those civilizations might have developed millions of years before us. Their intelligence, their technology, would be superior to ours to an unimaginable degree. So, Fermi asked, where is everybody? Why do we see no evidence of them? No probes, no radio signals, no clear traces, either on Earth or in space. This is the crux of the paradox. The silence of the universe is terrifying. But what if we consider all the information shared by the astronauts? Is Fermi's statement still true? Or is the truth that the evidence does exist, but it is not allowed to be made public? Is everything we know the full picture? What has caused the people who have actually seen the truth, the astronauts, the top scientists, to not dare share that information publicly? There is a very astute truth about the nature of human psychology. When new information challenges beliefs that are deeply ingrained in our perception, it triggers our primitive brain. Fear, skepticism, and rage will arise, because if that truth were revealed, it might lead to an unacceptable conclusion. What if we, the creatures called the most intelligent on the planet, are in reality just slaves? Slaves to another superior species? And what if the moon, our ancient companion, is not a solid, natural block of rock, but an artificial satellite? a hollow structure manufactured and deliberately placed in our orbit. If this is true, it is hard to accept. And it would change everything. What does all this mean? The ancient memory of an Earth without a moon has been passed from generation to generation, forming strange legends. So, where did the moon come from? Was it formed naturally, or was it created by a lost civilization? In the classic science fiction film The Matrix, the main character Neo faces a life-changing choice: the blue pill, symbolizing continuing to live in a peaceful, simulated world without knowing anything, or the red pill, symbolizing the discovery of a naked and terrible truth. And of course, driven by humanity's inherent curiosity, he chose the red pill. Upon taking it, Neo is thrown into a terrifying new reality. He discovers that his perception, and that of all humanity, is imprisoned. They are living in a programmed dream, while a more advanced, more malevolent race is draining their life energy to survive. The film sparked discussions in every corner. Is the truth of the Earth we live on darker than what we've always known? Are we truly free? Comedian Bill Hicks once had a famous saying, "The best kind of control is the kind you can't see. It's a prison without bars." If the artificial moon hypothesis is true, then are the strange structures, the artificial architectural materials found on it, part of that prison? Why was it placed there, right above our heads, with such perfect mathematical precision? Could the moon be an invisible bar, a giant machine designed to monitor and control human life? Let's go back in time. Long before Apollo or physical paradoxes, humans had a complex relationship with the moon. It is no coincidence that the object with that gentle light is associated with strange and somewhat frightening stories. While in Asian countries the moon is associated with romantic images like Sister Hang and Uncle Koi, in the West, it carries a much darker shade. It is linked to the image of the werewolf. On full moon nights, a normal person, under the influence of that silver light, will transform into a hideous creature, half human, half wolf, losing all reason and filled with animalistic rage. In the 16th century, the word lunacy was born, deriving directly from lunar, belonging to the moon. People believed the moon was what evoked bizarre, eccentric human behaviors. This is called the lunar effect, a supposed correlation that exists between the phases of the lunar cycle and changes in the behavior and physiology of living creatures on Earth, including humans. For decades, mainstream science has refuted this, calling it mere superstition, but the doubts remain. In the late 1980s, a significant number of studies were published. At least 40 studies examined a purposeful link between the moon and insanity rates. At least 20 other studies examined the link between the moon and birth rates. A 4-year-long study, ending in 1982, was published on the website of the United States National Institutes of Health, NIH. This study pointed to a significant increase in crime rates during each full moon. Those on the front lines, those who face society directly, all seem to agree. A veteran police officer in the United States affirmed, "From my 19 years of experience as a police officer, it is certain that on full moon days, we encounter people with stranger, more aggressive, and more argumentative behaviors." This evidence seems to point to one thing: the moon somehow is affecting us. But the question is, how? Let's look directly at the way the moon affects our planet. The clearest, undeniable impact is its gravity. It pulls and kneads the giant oceans, creating what we call tides. Now consider this: the human body, your body, is 60 to 75% water. If the moon can move entire oceans, how can we be the exception? In fact, we are not the exception. Every woman has a biological cycle that almost perfectly matches the cycle of the moon. It is an ancient synchronization, a sign that our bodies are listening to it. But the influence doesn't stop there. The full moon changes the surface tension of water. Surgeons have long recognized this, vaguely noticing that patients seem to bleed more easily if operated on during a full moon. And then there is the light. Our brains, to balance our physique and optimize our emotions, need both light and darkness. Daylight stimulates the production of serotonin, helping us feel happy and motivated. The darkness of night stimulates the production of melatonin, creating deep sleep and dreams. Melatonin, this hormone of darkness, is also what stimulates the pineal gland to produce DMT, a molecule often known as the catalyst for spiritual awakening and subconscious evolution. When the moon is full, the night sky is no longer dark. Its light, though gentle, is still strong enough to inhibit the brain's production of melatonin. The result? You find it harder to fall asleep. Your dreams are affected, and for individuals with certain sensitivities like epileptic or bipolar patients, this lack of sleep can increase the rate of seizures, creating serious consequences. A little-known study, also published in the National Journal of Medicine in 2016, went further. It pointed out that the moon has a huge influence on the neuroendocrine system. This study compared the moon to a clock for the brain, controlling human development and aging. The moon can influence both our cognition and our physique. If it is not a natural satellite but a hollow satellite placed there, then these effects are entirely intentional. So, who or what is living on and controlling that artificial satellite? And what is their reason for doing so? To answer, we must dig back into the furthest reaches of human memory, in ancient spiritual wisdom. In countless ancient spiritual texts, there is no shortage of evidence mentioning malevolent entities. They are humanoid, but completely different from humans. Demons in Christianity, Nagas in Hinduism, or jinn in Islam. All are described similarly, frightening, low-frequency beings. They don't just exist in the past. Even modern authors like Eckhart Tolle call these entities the pain body. But perhaps they are most thoroughly explained and described in the sacred texts called the Gnostic Gospels. These books were banned from circulation around 300 AD, replaced and almost erased from history. They fell into oblivion, believed to have been hidden in a cave in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, for nearly 1,600 years, before being rediscovered in 1945. The strange thing is, 1/5 of these manuscripts are dedicated to discussing these dark entities, invisible to the naked eye. The Gnostic Gospels call them the archons, the rulers. They are described as multi-dimensional beings, with long, even eternal lives. They specialize in luring humans so that we gradually lose awareness of our divine nature and our true selves. And this is the most frightening part. They feed on the life energy from negative emotions created by humans. Fear, anger, despair are their food. According to the Gnostic Gospel of Philip, this species of vampire exists based on human ignorance, not fear. Ignorance, the text writes, is the mother of all evil. If the moon is a control station, a giant machine designed to keep humanity in a state of ignorance, constantly generating negative emotions, then Neil Armstrong's quote takes on a completely new and much darker meaning. That's one small step for a man. Should it be replaced with, that's one small step on the moon, but one giant deception of mankind. We have chosen the red pill. We have gone down the rabbit hole. The truth, however terrible, is gradually being peeled away. If the moon is a prison without bars, if we are being monitored and harvested by ancient entities, then the final question is not, are we alone in the universe? But, how do we wake up? As long as humans remain distant from sacred stillness, distant from their own true selves, parasitic phantoms will continue to reside. They hide within our bodies like invisible assassins, silently gnawing away at our life energy, and then gradually seizing and controlling our very brains. This scenario is perhaps not unfamiliar. It is exactly like the moment the character Neo awakens in the movie The Matrix, after he bravely swallowed the red pill of truth. He realizes the world he once knew was just a prison for the mind. But we don't need a science fiction movie to see it. We just need to look at our own world. Why can people suddenly become so short-tempered? Why do we behave towards each other so aggressively and cruelly? The answer may lie deeper than we think. In 1957, a scientific research paper permanently changed the way we understand ourselves. The scientist Paul MacLean published his theory of the triune brain. He identified a region, the deepest, most ancient, called the amygdala. It is one of two almond-shaped nuclei located deep within our temporal lobe. It is the relay station, the buffer zone between the hypothalamus and the thalamus. But the shocking thing here is its composition. The structure of the amygdala is almost identical to the brain structure of ancient reptiles. This is the legacy of millions of years of evolution. The amygdala controls the body's most primitive responses. It governs our reaction to fear. It controls the fight or flight mechanism. And it is also the very part of the brain responsible for all of humanity's aggressive and violent behavior. When we think we are civilized beings achieving a balanced and efficient state of survival, we have forgotten one truth. The great astronomer Carl Sagan once made a famous comparison. He said that, beneath the fragile veneer of reason and consciousness, the human brain is identical to the brain of a crocodile. What is the consequence? When our territory is invaded, when our core beliefs are challenged, or simply when we feel threatened, we don't debate, we roar. The rational part of the brain is disabled, and the primitive dragon within awakens. The equilibrium that civilization has achieved is, in reality, incredibly fragile. Sagan himself, in his classic work, The Dragons of Eden, warned humanity time and again about the most dangerous enemy, the enemy that exists within each person. And this is the most terrifying crux. When this reptilian brain is activated more, when we continuously live in fear and anger, we will become more aggressive and tribal. And in that primitive state, humans are more easily manipulated psychologically than ever before. We can clearly see that. Even without the possession by strange creatures, the human mind can still be ignited, leading to unimaginable barbaric and violent acts. The truth sometimes is the most effective stimulant for the brain, but it can also lead to fractures in the mind and drive you insane. So, what if both are true? What if our primitive brain is being manipulated by something, a strange, multi-dimensional force that we cannot see with the naked eye? To answer this question, we must stop looking inward and start looking up at the night sky. Let's go to a stage. If you have ever witnessed a master hypnotist perform, you will see a strange phenomenon. He can tell the subject that there is no one else on the stage, and immediately, the volunteers around them, even though standing right in front, suddenly become invisible. The audience below can see everyone, but the hypnotized person cannot. This, in its most basic form, is mind control, although in this case the subject agreed for it to happen. But it raises a bigger question. If this can be effective on one or a few separate individuals, then how might it affect a collective on a larger scale? To understand this, we must step back and look at the nature of reality. Life is a fundamental component that makes up the universe, and the universe fundamentally is woven from light, from photons. Imagine a beam of warm yellow sunlight shining through your window, revealing the floating dust particles. According to quantum physics, this beam is not continuous. It is made up of countless small energy packets, called photons, that are constantly moving. Each living individual, you, me, every creature, is a complex collection of photons, vibrating at different frequencies. This is why reality is subjective. We may all see the same outside world, but we have completely different feelings about life. We experience it through the senses on our bodies. And this is the key. Our brains function as the ultimate decoder. It converts all the information humans receive from the outside, sight, hearing, touch, into electrical information. Each brain then decodes this electrical information according to its own distinct neurological program, shaped by memory, belief, and experience. You are not experiencing the world. You are experiencing your brain's decoded version of that world. Now, let's return to the hypnotist. What he does is not magic. He has, with words, placed an obstacle, a block command, in the decoding process. He stops the subject's brain from turning the received information, the image of the other people, into conscious electrical information. If we are living in a pre-written program, then hypnotists are just like programmers. Now let's scale this up. Trillions upon trillions of photons travel into our solar system from all over the galaxy. Their paths are bent by the giant magnetic fields of the sun and of the Earth itself. But there is one object, always there, watching us: the moon. According to researcher David Icke, the moon is not merely a block of rock reflecting sunlight. It reflects the entire electromagnetic energy spectrum. And he believes the moon is acting just like a firewall on the internet. It was placed there to block. It blocks certain high-frequency photons coming from deep in the galaxy from reaching Earth. Like a cosmic filter, the moon seems to be a barrier that causes wavelengths carrying advanced information, wavelengths of expanded consciousness, to be canceled. So, what is allowed to pass through? Only low-frequency wavelengths. And these wavelengths are precisely what maintain the state of negativity and indignation. They are the fuel that nourishes the primitive, angry, reptilian brain that exists in every human individual. As the ancient Gnostics said, ignorance will cause many unforeseen consequences. It is the mother of all evil. If the similar electromagnetic energy from the sun is like a master Wi-Fi transmitter, providing energy to every living individual on the planet, then the moon, it seems, has been put in place as an information firewall. It blocks waves, diverts them, and distorts the original frequency. Instead of allowing us to access the full spectrum of consciousness, the moon is transmitting a frequency that keeps us locked, focused on a narrow band of perception that has been predetermined. Does that mean that the human range of understanding is being imprisoned within a specific framework? To put it simply, the way the moon might be controlling humans is no different from what many governments around the world are doing right now. Let's take a specific example: China's Great Firewall. The Chinese government is filtering a massive amount of information that its citizens can access via the internet. You will not be able to search for information considered to affect the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Try searching for the world-shaking incident at Tiananmen Square. It was one of the bloodiest events that took place in the 20th century. And you are still able to read information about that event, but the Chinese people are not. They cannot search for any information about the Tiananmen event through their domestic internet. What the Chinese people find are only happy, peaceful images of people at Tiananmen. To prevent bloodshed from happening on its territory again, the government is choosing to maintain absolute control over information. Now, let's return to our story. Is it possible that the moon is the tool of some force from outer space, placed in Earth's orbit to control our reality information? It sounds crazy, but there is an even more astonishing truth. China is relentlessly experimenting to create its own artificial moon. This is not science fiction. This is a real project. Gravity on the moon is only about 1/6 of Earth's gravity. If you drop a rock on the moon, it will fall much slower. If you weigh 68 kilograms on Earth, you will only weigh about 11 kilograms on the moon. To prepare for the space race, China is building a breakthrough research facility. The goal, to accurately simulate the low-gravity environment of the moon. This facility is called China's artificial moon, and it was inspired by an experiment that was almost a joke, using magnets to make a frog levitate. A scientist at the China University of Mining and Technology said the facility's simulation system can make gravity disappear. It can even be sustained for as long as desired. It works by using very strong magnetic fields. Located in the center of the facility is a vacuum chamber. Inside the chamber contains a small-scale moon, 60 centimeters in diameter. This artificial moon landscape is also made of light rock and dust to create the most realistic feeling. Why do this? This system will allow scientists to test equipment in a simulated harsh moon environment, preventing costly miscalculations. They can test whether new technologies like 3D printing can be used to build structures on the lunar surface. This helps to evaluate the feasibility of establishing 2 long-term human settlements. This is China's next effort to lead in the space race. They successfully landed a probe on the far side of the moon in 2019. And in 2020, they brought rock samples back to Earth for the first time in 44 years. And incredibly, all of this achievement began with that humorous experiment in 1997 with a frog. The frog, in essence, is not magnetic, but when placed in the extremely strong magnetic field of an electromagnet, it also becomes a weak magnet. This is the physical phenomenon called diamagnetism. The magnetic force pushed the frog up, precisely balancing its weight, and the frog levitated in midair. The scientist Andrew Geim, who conducted the experiment, later won a Nobel Prize. But he and his colleague were not the first. In 1991, 2 French physicists had discovered this diamagnetic levitation force. So, if the experiment for an artificial moon is truly successful, the night sky in China could be 10 times brighter than it is now. Humans are learning to simulate the moon, but do we really understand what the moon we are simulating is? The ideas of an artificial moon may sound absurd, but they have been affirmed with certainty by the theological author Barbara Marciniak. According to her, the moon is not an inanimate block of rock. It is an incredibly powerful electronic computer, and it has been, is, and will limit many of humanity's programs on this planet. She believes that energy from the moon has transmitted specific electromagnetic frequencies to Earth for ages. The moon is a fabricated satellite, and was anchored intentionally outside Earth's atmosphere, like an intermediary device, a monitoring station for a cosmic supercomputer. If these things are true, then it seems the true owners of Earth are hiding behind that moon. And all the advancements in technology, the leaps in human evolution, all seem to be arranged, controlled, and monitored by a satellite named the Moon. It doesn't just affect humans. There have been many studies showing that the full moon directly affects animals and plants. According to the two scientists Gurdjieff and Muraviev, their theory goes even further and is more frightening. They argue that everything living on Earth, whether human, animal, or plant, is food for the moon. They believe the moon is a giant organism that is nourishing itself with all that lives and grows on Earth. Both agree that the moon is sucking the life forms of our planet. In 2000, a scientific study on the relationship between the full moon and animals was conducted in the United Kingdom. The report pointed to an undeniable link. A significant increase in animal bites on humans is completely real. In fact, hospitals recorded that the number of patients seeking treatment for animal bites spiked precisely at the time of the full moon. The study concluded that animals tend to bite humans more during the full moon period. And then, in 2014, a physicist and astronomer published a strange video. He was monitoring the moon from Earth through his telescope. If you look very closely at that footage, you will see something that appears to be thermal energy surrounding the moon. It ripples like waves, continuously moving across its surface. A few months later, many scientists began to study this heat wave. They realized that this wave was continuously maintained whenever they conducted observations. This has led more than a few scientists to an unbelievable conclusion, that the moon we see is actually just a sophisticated three-dimensional projection in space. So, what is being hidden behind all this data? The moon doesn't seem to be merely a rock in space. It holds too many stories. In the end, there is still no practical evidence about the moon that has been made public in a clear, transparent way. Every event, every theory, seems to be just speculation, echoing one-sidedly in our minds. The thought that, right at this moment, as you are curled up in your blanket, listening to this narrative, you are being monitored from above by some mysterious force, is hard to accept. But if their purpose is to amplify anger, to amplify the reptilian brain, to prevent us from developing to a higher level of consciousness, then that is what is truly unacceptable. Amidst all the speculation, there is a reality unfolding, an indisputable scientific fact. As you are listening to this video, the moon is, bit by bit, slowly, moving very far away from us. Every year the moon takes a portion of Earth's rotational energy and uses it to push itself into a higher orbit by about 4 centimeters. When it first formed, about 4.5 billion years ago, the moon was only about 22,530 kilometers from Earth. But now, that distance has reached over 400,000 kilometers. At the same time, the Earth's rotation speed is slowing down. The day we are experiencing is gradually getting longer. Is it possible that this hollow satellite is sensing the strong development of science and technology that humans are mastering? Is it possible it fears it will be discovered one day soon and is conducting a slow retreat? All of this is very hard to answer precisely. The moon in particular, and the universe in general, still has been, is, and always will be, a giant, silent mystery, waiting for humanity to explore.